If you have questions or suggestions for future podcasts, please submit them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The freedom to work. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. The Wall Street Journal editorial board wrote a column titled California's French 4-Day Work Week. The article says, a bill moving through the California Legislature would shorten the normal work week from 40 to 32 hours. Workers who put in more than 32 hours in a week would have to be paid time and a half. And get this, employers would be prohibited from reducing workers' current pay rate, so they would be paid the same for working 20% less, says the article. Here's how the French get mentioned in the headline. They tried this in the year 2000. There was high unemployment in France, so they thought they'd spread the work around a little. My freshman at Dallas Baptist University could predict the disaster that resulted. It forced the best producers to work less. Seems like we want the best to work more, not less. LeBron James plays more minutes than the last guy on the Lakers bench. Would the California Legislature require that all 12 of the Lakers play the same number of minutes? Would they require that all 26 of the Oakland Athletics players have the same number of at-bats? That they throw the same number of pitches? Matter of fact, why doesn't the California Legislature use this law themselves? They could require that each legislator submit the same number of bills for consideration. When Sergei Seidamatov and I wrote Biblical Economic Policy, we performed a little systematic theology of biblical economics, and we came up with 10 biblical commandments of economics. The proposed law from the California Legislature violates at least 5 of them. First, freedom. Revelation 3:20 is the key scripture that we found to indicate the Christian idea of freedom. It reads, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him and he with me." Freedom. If we are free to accept or reject the invitation of God, then it seems like we should have as much freedom as possible in our economic lives. Certainly not perfect freedom, because we have a fallen nature. But we certainly should be free to choose the number of hours we work each week. The California legislators have cited Microsoft's 4-day work week in Japan as support for their idea. But notice, Microsoft had the freedom to enact that policy without being ordered by its government. In podcast number 113, titled People Should Be Free, I unpack more details about the intersection of Christianity and economics. It is freedom. The California Legislature wants to control labor. That didn't work out well during slavery when the supply of labor was controlled, and it won't work out well trying to control demand of labor either. Control of labor always leads to dependence, and as this guy, Friedrich von Hayek, points out, it puts you on the road to serfdom. The California Legislature is punishing success. The rule would apply only to companies with more than 500 employees. Here we go again. If you're providing enough consumer surplus to your fellow Californians, which causes you to employ 500 or more people, the California Legislature is going to punish you. We don't have to imagine the creative ways companies will find to stay under the 500 mark, because we saw it when Obamacare applied to companies with over 50 employees. Companies purposely reduce the consumer surplus so they can limbo under the barrier. During a visit to Chichen Itza in Mexico, we learned that the prehistoric Mayans played a version of basketball where the objective was to throw a ball through a vertical ring on the wall. But here's the similarity with the California Legislature. The captain of the winning Mayan team was rewarded by, wait for it, death. Ginger astutely observed, they killed off their best performers. It's no wonder the culture died out. She just explained why companies are moving from California and New York to Texas and Florida. 2, work is good. Work is good is the second violation. In his insightful book, Gross National Happiness, Arthur Brooks points out the connection between work and happiness. Here's what he writes. Work is an authentic source of happiness, and idleness, especially involuntary idleness, is a source of pure misery, end quote. So the California Legislature is purposely making their fellow Californians miserable. Brooks goes on to point out, very happy people work more hours each week than those who are pretty happy, who in turn work more hours than people who are not too happy. Work brings happiness because it gives our lives meaning, says Arthur Brooks. In the Christian worldview, we see work as a part of creation, not the fall. Adam and Eve had work to do early in Genesis 1. They had animals to name, they had the garden to keep. But folks who don't follow the Christian worldview believe that work is a part of the fall. They see work as burdensome and painful, and they only see what they get out of work. They don't see work as a service to others. A study just this week showed that half of Gen Zers would quit a job that didn't make them happy. Get it? See who they're working for? Themselves. While the Christian worldview sees work as for God and for their fellow man. The California legislators are denying the Christian worldview of work. Number 3, don't steal is the third violation of the rules that Sergey and I found when we wrote Biblical Economic Policy. It's number 8 on Moses' list of commandments, and it reads, don't steal. So Sergey and I stole that one from him, and it became one of our 10 biblical commandments of economics. Forcing people to work without pay steals their labor. Forcing companies to pay without receiving work is also stealing. So randomly deciding that a company must pay for 40 hours and receive 32 hours of labor is theft of 8 hours of pay. That's a violation of the 8th commandment. Socialists always make this assumption that demanders of labor have power over suppliers. Of course, this depends on the relative supply-demand relationship of labor. The best thing you can do for suppliers of labor is to adopt policies that increase demand. During the Trump administration, Black and Hispanic unemployment fell to record lows. This moved power from companies who demanded the labor and gave that power to employees who supplied the labor. So the answer is very simple in economics. If you want labor to have power, adopt policies that promote production. President Trump gave power to workers via freedom. The California legislature is trying to give them power via power. That never works out well in the end. Number 4, use honest measures. In our book, Biblical Economic Policy, Sergey and I cite Deuteronomy 25:15 as a key scripture about honest measures. It reads, "You must maintain accurate and honest weights and measures so that you may live long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you." Now, for more on that topic, I'll refer you to podcast 67, titled Free Scale. The California legislator's proposal requires companies to pay their employees the same for doing 32 hours of work than they paid for 40. That's not an honest measure. It's also laughable. Talk about inflation. Inflation is simply more dollars chasing fewer goods. This absurd proposal would produce 25% inflation in its first week. Now, fortunately, the United States is a republic where states can sometimes do what they want. So we can watch a continual 50-state competition for the best economic ideas. Arthur Laffer's latest book is titled The Wealth of States, and it studies that competition. The result is very predictable. People are moving from California and New York to Florida and Texas because that's where the jobs are. This foolish proposal clearly explains why the jobs are there. Okay, let's advance this proposal a little further. So if 32 hours is better than 40, isn't 26 better than 32? Hey, where does this end? Oh, with people being paid for not working. I explained that economically unsustainable idea in podcast 95, titled Paying People Not to Work. Someday, I'll record a podcast explaining how L. Frank Baum wrote The Wizard of Oz as a political economic allegory. But for today, You need to visualize only the scene where the dog Toto pulls back the curtain and the wizard warns,
"Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain."
Well, that man is the California Legislature. They think they can pull some strings and create value without work. They can't. Number 5, love your neighbor as yourself. When teaching the chapter on consumer surplus at Dallas Baptist University, I play the part of Walmart and I offer a box of tissues to a student for $1. We learn that in a competitive environment, both parties get richer when the consumer is free to make a competitive choice of suppliers. Walmart gets richer by producer surplus. The buyer gets richer via consumer surplus. The conclusion is contained in my little book titled Economics and the Christian Worldview. Quote, "If you love your neighbor, you'll provide products and services they demand. If you love yourself, you make a profit while doing so." California Assemblywoman Christian Garcia does not seem to love her neighbor, and she's even more shallow on her economic understanding. She states, "There has been no correlation between working more hours and better productivity," end quote. Then why doesn't the California Legislature meet 25% less? Actually, 50% less might help. Here in Texas, the legislature is limited to 140 days every other year. You see, this gets back to your worldview assumption. Are more laws good or bad? See, at some base level, fallen people certainly need some rules. But just like the Laffer curve, more laws tend to harm the economy, not help it. We make that assumption in Texas, so we don't want our legislators in Austin making new rules for us. Yeah, it's simple. You restrict what you don't want, in this case, frivolous rules, and you encourage what you want, freedom, from overzealous legislators. Socialism is based in power, which the Wall Street Journal editorial board clearly explains in the last line of their article, where they observe, socialists like to order other people around. So I'll close with another phrase from The Wizard of Oz. The wizard leaves the last scene in a hot air balloon. Get it? Carried away by his own hot air. When the munchkins plead, come back, he explains,
"I can't come back. I don't know how it works. Goodbye."
California Legislature doesn't know how the economy works. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time. For more information, please visit us online at davearnott.com. If you have questions or suggestions for future podcasts, please submit them online or in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.